So how's this for YouTube clickbait? I went to Ohio and lived. What's up, y'all? We're doing some renovations in the basement. At least we did renovations a long time ago, so this is a new look. I suppose you can actually see the whole basement, my lair. Hopefully this place will start to look a bit nicer in the near future. In the meantime though, what's up? Just to get the agenda straight out of the way, in this video I'm going to be reviewing the Excision Trifecta. I marathoned the entirety of Subsidia again. I went to Lost Lands, and then in general I just kind of want to give my thoughts, my synopsis on the entire Excision brand as a whole. In case you guys don't know who Excision is, he's a small dubstep producer who's from Canada. He has the same birthday as me, and he's been making music for about a decade now, so I'm really hoping he pops up. I'm gonna give a bit of backstory. For those of you who don't follow me on Twitter or have joined my Discord or any of that, do people say Twitter? Do people use Twitter? Once a year prior to the pandemic, but only for 2 years, except for last year, and then I guess this year, myself and a group of friends try to get together to meet up at some place in the world every single time it's been in the States or Canada, for the sole purpose of, meeting up, finally meeting your URL online friends, but also happens to coincide with some sort of music festival. So we've got the music aspect, but then we've also got, the friend meetup aspect. We have food, we play Smash, we enjoy music. If y'all haven't followed me for long enough, I've attended EDC Orlando back in 2018 and 2019. I also went to Monster Cat Compound in 2018 when I won, 2019, and then last year when restrictions started lifting up. This year, however, for the most part, most of us decided that we didn't want to attend Monster Cat Compound. No ill intent or will or bad reason as to why. We had just done it 3 times at this point. We wanted to, spread our wings and see what other options there were. And that's when the idea of Excision running shows came up. Excision runs 3 festivals. He runs Bass Canyon on the West Coast, Lost Lands on the East Coast, and then he throws Blue Paradise, which is in Mexico at a resort. Lost Lands was the closest to the most amount of people that were interested in going, and we figured, screw it. We'll try it out. We'll see what happens. If y'all didn't know earlier, I was being sarcastic. Excision has been a staple in the dubstep and the bass music scene, electronic scene. He's been making music for so long. He essentially completed the quest line for making music and has started going for his own side quests, making his own show, running his own label. 2 of them, but I'll go into that a bit later. And at this point, Excision has essentially built himself this empire for the electronic scene. Regardless of if you like him or you don't like him, I think one of the big consensuses is that he's done a lot to bring dubstep and bass music into the mainstream, and at least for those who can't make bass music their full-time career, has been able to offer a lot of opportunities for up-and-coming artists. The most recent example that comes to mind was the Bass Music Fund. I don't remember the exact name of it, but basically if you happen to be living in the United States, Canada, or in the UK, Excision essentially granted a large sum of money for 10 music producers in situations that were more difficult than the average producer, but also had the means and the plan on how they would have succeeded. This is just one of many instances where Excision has given back to the music scene. And in the lead up to going to Lost Lands, I figured, you know what would make a really great marathon video? Subsidia. I made a video back when Subsidia had first launched, and they released their 3 comps, their Dusk, Night, and Dawn compilation with 118 songs, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't 100% remember my general consensus, but I think it was something along the lines of the release was not very well thought out. The music was very miss, but at least the music that hit had the opportunity to shine from how much music was either indistinguishable from each other or just not that good. I guess since I'm talking about Subsidia, I might as well start with that. For those of you who don't know, Subsidia is not Excision's first music label. His first music label was Rotten Records, which was also releasing music for ages before many of the other music producers in the scene started coming out with their own record labels. 2019, 2020, I think saw the start and the rise of a lot of grassroots record labels for artists that are trying to, cultivate their own community and bring together a sound that they are also trying to pioneer. The 3 that immediately come to mind when I think of artists making their own record labels has got to be Ulasyle's Halcyon, Chime's Rushdown, and Subtronic's Cyclops Records. And during that time, Excision had decided that he would come out with his own record label, Subsidia, which, while I think is all fine and dandy, does kind of bring up the question as to why would you make a new record label when you already have one? Completely aside from the topic that Rotten Records was not consistently releasing up until the point when Subsidia had come out, I think when you look at Rotten Records and you look at the branding and the marketing that was going into not just Excision, but the Excision shows, the Excision music, Rotten Records was kind of this outlier Excision creation that had kind of gotten dust over time and has started to become forgotten. Excision by no means needed to make a dubstep label. He was doing completely fine, and as mentioned, he already had one. But I think the rise of people creating their own music labels, and to some degree seeing the success of people starting up their own record labels, I think Excision saw he could revive his hold and his footprint of a record label, but he decided to make something new. And he not only decided to make something new, that being Subsidia, but did it in a way that had never been done before. That being releasing 3 compilations consisting of 118 songs in one day. And regardless of all of the critiques that I have for releasing music in that style, it was definitely one of a kind, never been done before. So immediately Subsidia had eyes on it. And generally speaking, I didn't really hear anybody talking about Subsidia afterwards. I would hear about Subsidia when a new comp dropped, or when one of my mutual producers within my electronic circles was releasing on Subsidia, and occasionally when the Subsidia record label would release some weird, wonky, wacky, out of the blue song. But generally speaking, Subsidia has kind of been under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. What I think most people don't seem to realize though is that Subsidia was essentially the missing puzzle piece for the Excision trifecta that I mentioned earlier. If we had to imagine a triangle, you've got Excision at the top. Number 2 has got to be his shows. He's been doing shows for numerous years now, and Blue Paradise was just the newest installation, the newest branch of that. You've got your Bass Canyon in the West Coast, Lost Lands in the East Coast, and Blue Paradise in Latin America. He's essentially covered most of North America. And that's going to be the second part of that trifecta. The third part of that trifecta is the record label. But you might be asking to yourself, why does he need a record label? Excision is the main artist that is grouping together all of this, making things work behind the scenes, or at least hiring the correct people to make all of this work. The shows are obviously a way of him promoting not only himself, but the bass music scene, the music that he's trying to show, the music he's trying to play, and is obviously a method for revenue. I think while a lot of people might try to argue that the record label was a method of continuing to stay alive and thrive during the pandemic when you couldn't do shows, you couldn't travel, when I take a step back and I was listening to all of the Subsidia music, the way that I kind of thought of it, and especially was mostly confirmed, at least for myself when I went to Lost Lands, was that there was a general cohesive sound, a style, a group of people that Excision was essentially creating a network for. Whenever you check out an Excision show and its lineup, Excision's not on the lineup once, or even twice, but sometimes 3 times. And at least one of those shows is going to be a 2-hour show. How does Excision fill that much time while keeping it fresh, but also being able to continue pushing his own self-interest? He can play his own music, he can play his best friend's music, or he can play the music on his own record label. Damn, that song was a banger. Damn, that song was sick. Where do I listen to it? Subsidia Records. And that's basically what happened during the 2020 Lost Lands or Couchland show, if my brain is serving me correctly. I probably have the name wrong, so my bad. But the main point of it is that back in January of 2020, they were doing a virtual show. He was debuting not only the record label, but this new graphics pack, how everything was gonna look. And that's where we got to see the futuristic city landscape that you are going to essentially start to see in every single compilation. But throughout his 2-hour set, he was just playing music from the 3 comps. That was it. The entire set, for all intents and purposes, was original, as most of the music, to my understanding at least, had not been released yet. He was able to create a 2-hour set of original content, not necessarily his content, but other people's content that he was signed, that he has licensed, and that has become part of the larger Excision ecosystem. When I was marathoning Subsidia, I did not know who any of these producers were. Some of them I recognize. You've got your Sullivan Kings, your Dion Timmers, Wales Company, you've got all of those names that are already established. But as I continued listening to the music, you did start to see a couple of artists that were returning to their label, that were signing more music. In the year of 2020, Subsidia was pulling an Elysian Records. And if you guys haven't watched my Elysian Records video, basically they had signed more artists than they had signed music, and everyone was becoming a forgotten face. And I think that's just due to the nature of how the first 3 releases were 3 massive compilations with a wide array of music from artists that had never featured on the label before. But slowly into 2021 and then 2022, the number of artists and songs slowly began to equalize and then eventually was surpassed. Subsidia, for the most part, runs a release schedule of a release every 2 weeks or so, give or take. But a release can be anything from a single from an EP to an entire new comp. In my original Subsidia marathon video, I had theorized that for Excision to continue the longevity and the livelihood of Subsidia, he's going to have to not only continue releasing those 3 comps, but probably at an annual basis of the same size package. I think my thesis was that generally people are going to forget about Subsidia, and to actually maintain relevance, he's going to have to continue making these mega release compilations every single year. Would that have been a better idea? I don't really know. At this point, he's released 9 volumes of Dawn, Dusk, and Night, and if you were to check any of the compilations, none of them really go past 20 songs. They average between 10 to 20 songs, not 30 or 50 or 70, however many the first couple comps were. They were insane. But at least for the first year, running this bi-monthly release schedule, the bulk of the releases were compilations. And so because of that, it paired into the main issue that I was mentioning earlier, which is that Subsidia was releasing too many artists. Everyone was coming in and leaving as quickly as they came. Slowly, as we got into 2021 and 2022, there was a pivot in the releases that they were trying to sign and the promotional strategy that was coming along with it. Immediately after the first 3 compilations, they had signed the ZEKE EP, which has become a bit of an infamous release for a number of people. But the ZEKE EP was not a one-off. It was the start of something new for Subsidia. They had EPs from Sullivan King, from Yitip, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Dion Timmer, Jansen, and then even an LP from Wales. If your goal was to sign just a singular song on Subsidia, your only method of getting onto the label was through one of the 3 compilations. If you managed to sign a single and not be on a comp, you either collaborated with Excision or you are a large enough artist to release a single, such as Dion Timmer, who's essentially the Excision's right-wing man. The third option is signing an EP. The single might be released on one of the comps, but then later released alongside an EP that follows. Similarly to how a lot of record labels do it, they may also just release a single and then release the EP the next release cycle. Of these 651 or so songs though, one of the things that I did think was pretty interesting is that the entire label only has 2 remixes, one by Dubscribe and one from Kayvon. Both of them of Excision tracks. And while I feel like this might be something that would be easy to gloss over, I kind of just feel like on a very subtle level, this kind of just ties back into what I mentioned earlier about Excision and original content. What's the point of signing a remix or a remix EP when he can just sign more original music? And for anybody that's curious, the 2 remixes are Robo Kitty by Excision and Downlink Dubscribe remix, and Breaking Through by Excision and Dion Timmer, Kayvon remix. I really like the Kayvon remix, although I feel like low-key the only reason I like that remix is because it reminds me of Kayvon's track Different from the first compilation. I think they might also be the same key and maybe even the same structure, so for all intents and purposes it might also just be the same song. But I like the first one, so I like the sequel too. But yeah, I think the main point, at least for this section, is that unlike many other labels where there is, I would say, a lot of avenues on getting onto the label, with Subsidia it's very straightforward. If Subsidia was like a Mario game, the final boss is collaborating with Excision. And if we were to talk about the self-interest of the artists that are being signed, I'd imagine that with enough releases and slowly as you grow up the totem pole of the bass producer scene, the final goal is to get a collaboration with Excision. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not trying to say this in a malicious way. If anything, it's probably the best thing that Excision can also do himself as an artist. After releasing music for more than a decade, we've heard every Excision song. Every Excision song starts to blend into each other. So the only option to keep his sound fresh, but his name also relevant, and to continue releasing new music under his own alias, is to just work with other people. And why not? That's a lot of fun. You get to collaborate with other producers in the scene that you enjoy, that you also want to bring to rise up. Not only does it benefit Excision, but it benefits the artists that they're collaborating with. I remember when Skrillex had dropped his 2 albums at the beginning of the year, one of the main criticisms, critiques, comments that I saw from a number of people was how there was basically no Skrillex solo work. Every single song was a collaboration. And when you really look into the details, the reason there were so many artists credited is because Skrillex was sampling other people's music. And so I guess for proper licensing, they were also included in the credits, even if they may not have had, I guess, a hands-on input in the song with Skrillex when he was making, for a lack of better words, a licensed remix under his own name. But I guess the main thing that I'm trying to get at is that there isn't really Excision solo tracks. Every single Excision song, at least on Subsidia, is a collaboration. And the main outlier to that was the Excision Onyx LP, which I will get. I'm not there yet. Let's rewind it a bit. As I mentioned, the first couple months of Subsidia were, for the most part, just compilations and a few EPs. Let's talk about some fun statistics. In 2020, even though Subsidia was basically around for 3.5 months, they had released 164 songs. In 2021, things got cranked up like crazy with 235 songs. And it really felt that way in my listening experience. In 2022, there was 142 songs, which was a massive drop. And so far this year, in 2023, they've released approximately 110 songs. And that is probably for the better. To be honest, when I was listening through the first 2 years of Subsidia, that was a slog to go through. Let me tell you, there were diamonds in the rough, but even the diamonds were rough to go through. I'm not going to point out any artists by name. Obviously, I'm not trying to, make any enemies here. But for a lack of better words, the best way I can describe the music being signed to Subsidia is, but it bangs live. But this song slaps live. This song goes bonkers on the mega speakers. That's a bit of a problem. I don't go to many shows. I don't go out very much. I'm not really an introvert. I just don't have anyone to go with. And then also the nearest shows to me are like an hour and a half away on public transportation, and I'm not trying to do that on a Saturday night. I'm trying to be cozy. I'm trying to be writing my next YouTube video. I'm trying to marathon 600 Subsidia songs. If the main sound that you are signing, the music that you are signing is music that is meant to be played live, then yeah, if you go to a show, if you go to Lost Lands, that stuff's gonna go crazy. And let me tell you, I was at Lost Lands. I know, hard to believe. That stuff, it went bonkers. It was crazy. But when I'm at work at my 9 to 5 with my headphones and I'm playing some crazy rhythm tune, let me tell you, that sucks. It sucks. It hurts. My ears. Listen, after I listened to the first 3 comps that came out, I had one out of context. It wasn't even out of context, to be fair. Screenshot where I said, I turned on my faucet and it sounded like a Subsidia track. A lot of people laughed at that. It was really funny. It was also easy to dunk on Subsidia and Excision. It's always easy to dunk on Excision and Subsidia. I'm so sorry, Excision. But then you know what the people who also went to Lost Lands with me said? White noise sounds like dubstep now. It does. All right. It's just loud, noisy, distortion, crunchy, really abrasive to the ear sometimes. So if your goal is to find music that you'll enjoy at home, and you're listening on speakers, earbuds, I would say a solid 70% of the music, I did not enjoy it. Did not enjoy it. But I'm going to revisit that because I know people will say, well, you got to go to a show. You got to hear it live. You got to hear that artist play that song live. And that's the thing. If I have to experience the song in a live setting to enjoy it, then I don't think the song is inherently an enjoyable or good track. And that's even more exemplified from when I went to EDC Orlando 2018 and I went to Loudpack and he just started playing not even an electronic song. I don't even remember what the song was. I wonder if I can find the clip. I'll play it if I do. But basically it was just a pop song, all right? The fundamental rule of playing music live is that if you play it loud enough, it's gonna bang. It doesn't matter what song you play. You can play the most garbage song and it's going to be bonkers. It's gonna go banger. It's gonna go crazy. So if I have to hear it live for the song to be enjoyable and good, it's not a good song. That's just my opinion. You guys can disagree with me, but you have the wrong opinion. Get dunked on. We've cut off a large portion of music. The music that can only be enjoyed live. Not a fan of it. Very sorry. From that point on, you've got the 30% of music that you can somewhat enjoy to some degree, not live. But then from there, I also just found that quality and quantity was always conflicting. From my few internal contacts who may or may not know a thing or no thing, and I mean, it's also probably a very logical conclusion to come to. It's very unlikely that Excision is personally handpicking the music that he is signing. Not that I'm trying to imply that the people who are signing music to Subsidia know what they are signing or that they don't know what they are signing. But the main point is that they are probably not trying to sign the best music, if that makes sense. There's definitely some music in there that's mixed very weirdly, elements that are kind of all over the place. There's some stuff that's just not in key or changes keys in a way that's very unappealing, unappetizing. But if you throw a dart at a wall enough times, you will eventually hit the target. And there are good songs on there. I'm not gonna name particular artists or songs because, as y'all know, I always like to make a playlist that I will be including in the description below of my favorite tracks from my Subsidia marathon, and that I will hopefully continue to update, so you guys can definitely go down and check out my top picks. But I guess the main thing that I'm trying to get at is that if you are somebody who's trying to start marathoning Subsidia or has no interest in the back catalog but wants to start marathoning it now, I would say just keep low expectations. If you happen to be somebody that enjoys all the music Subsidia signs, I'm not going to judge you, but if I know my core audience enough, I would think that a lot of the music that is signed by Subsidia are not songs that my audience or the people that follow me will particularly enjoy that much, or at least in bulk as I did. Yo, what's up? It's me from the future. I was listening back to my audio and I'm probably going to do another similar post-edit narration. I did include this at the end of the video, but I wanted to include it earlier just so that nobody started commenting early about something important I missed. But the main thing that I just wanted to say is, if you do end up deciding that you want to listen to Subsidia either from the beginning or from right now in the present, the EPs are generally a very safe listening experience. I usually find myself enjoying at least 1 to 2 tracks from those EPs. The danger is mostly from the compilations, where sometimes you get some pretty solid compilations where I end up liking a lot of the tracks, and I'll even find myself liking the songs that I would generally consider of lesser quality or of refining. But the compilations are also where I have found entire flops, where every single song was just not an enjoyable experience to listen to. And if you're the kind of person that needs to listen to an entire song, maybe even once or twice through, those compilations will take a lot of your time. So I know there would be a lot of people that'd be very disappointed investing that much time for generally a flop. If you want to keep up with Subsidia, but you find that you just don't have that much time to spare, I would definitely recommend following the EPs. Ironically enough, I have also found that the LPs kind of fall back into the same pool of where a lot of the songs are just a miss for me, despite them all being a curated experience from one artist. Maybe I've just not really been that fond of the 3 LPs, that being from Wales, Freaky, and Excision. But if you did want to listen to Subsidia, but wanted something quick and easy to check out, I would just say go check out the EPs. Anyways, back to the video. That said, compared to Elysian Records, which is the most recent marathon I just did, at least all of their music is available. Now, as y'all know, I'm a SoundCloud diehard. I like my SoundCloud consumption. I hate Spotify, alright? I'm part of the Spotify bad crew. The main point I'm trying to get at is that if you decide that you do want a marathon Subsidia, all the songs are on SoundCloud and Spotify. There is one major thing to consider, and this is not only with SoundCloud, but also with YouTube. I remember hearing about this. I don't remember who told me, but there is an incentive to release music on Spotify first before any other platform. I believe it might have in part to do with playlist additions. The reason I've kind of danced around the number of songs that I've released on Subsidia is because since I'm doing my marathon on SoundCloud, not all the songs that were recently released are on SoundCloud. SoundCloud and the YouTube are about a month late. And I had the exact same issue when the first 3 comps released when Subsidia came out. At first I thought it was just a distribution error. I thought maybe, they're trying to get their feet going. They're trying to hit the ground running. They're still trying to figure out how to get things released on time. No, they still do that. They not only release things late, but they don't release everything at once. You're gonna get 1 song per day starting 3 weeks from now. So a 20-song compilation might take like 2 weeks to fully distribute on all of the other platforms. My current day example, it is right now the 17th of October, 2023, 11:47 p.m. And the most recent release on their SoundCloud is Cliptic's Breach. I believe in actually 12 minutes, there's going to be a new Excision and Amity track. So that'll be interesting. But as for other releases that are currently not on Subsidia, Cliptic released an entire EP, and Alien Park has another single that is coming out after the Excision track. So that's not even out on Spotify yet, so that's not even like a fair comparison or anything. But the main point is there's an entire EP and soon to be a single from Excision that I'm not going to be hearing on SoundCloud anytime soon. I'm probably going to listen to it just to get the head start on it. But the main point is that if your goal is to be on top of the game, it's unfortunately Spotify. If you don't care or don't mind, waiting a few weeks for the song to eventually come out onto your preferred platform, Subsidia is going to be all right for you, I guess. Some other fun statistics before I move on. There are 3 songs on Subsidia that are less than 2 minutes. That being Focus's Dogs at 1:58, Hayam Ghost's Suckas and Bustas at 1:50, and YGFG's Sight at 1 minute 47 seconds. A solid 107-second track. on the other end of the spectrum, if you don't include mixes, because Subsidia has a couple of mixes that have been formally released onto many other platforms, you've got 4 songs that are longer than 5 minutes. Soul on Fire by Noya featuring Char May is 5 minutes 11. Your Fault by LV, Slander, and Excision is 5:14. Was also on the electronic Billboard charts when it came out for a little while. I remember that one. You by Resurrect is 5 minutes 40. And you got one track longer than 6 minutes, which is Promises by Louis JXX. As I already mentioned, only 2 people have released remixes, but the statistics that I find more interesting than the people who have released the most amount of times, the most songs, is actually, for myself at least, the artist that is featured the most. We always like to talk about, I guess you could say, the label heavyweights, and I always find it at least pretty interesting just to see who's the vocalist that gets contacted the most. As a quick example, when it was Disciple, it used to be Split Breed. I kind of wonder where they went. I really liked Split Breed, but nowadays, without a doubt, it's Virus Syndicate, as y'all know. For Monster Cat, I have absolutely no idea what the most featured artist is, but I'd like to imagine it's still Danica Nadeau for some reason. You know, her freaking marathon run back at like 026 or whatever, when she had like 7 features on one compilation. You know, it's probably got to amount to something. But in the realm of Subsidia, it's very rare when an artist features more than once. Of the 476 artists that have been on Subsidia, 77 of them were credited as featured vocalists. And of those 77, only 9 of those artists had featured more than once. We've got Ali Cut, Deandra Faye, Armani Rain, Monica Santucci, Les Gold, and Charme, all with 2 featured credits. We've got XZ, which almost reads like XD, with 3 feature credits. And then you've got Glenna, GLNNA, I don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm so sorry, with a whopping 7 artist credits. And with only 1 more credit than her is Blue Pill. I was very surprised to see Glenna having so many features. And at first I thought it was just kind of an outlier situation, because when Yidip did their EP back in 2020, I think she featured on it like 2 or 3 times. But then people continued asking her to feature on their tracks. And then Blue Pill, slowly but surely, was climbing up the ranks to now be the #1 featured artist. So congrats to Blue Pill. As for albums, there have been 25 albums on Subsidia, and no artist has had more than 1 album. All of the artists that have released on Subsidia with an album, EP, LP, either way, has only done once. And I would actually be kind of interested if that is going to be a continuing running theme. I don't know if that's advantageous from a business perspective, but I do kind of find it interesting. As I mentioned earlier, you've got the main final boss of collaborating with Excision, but then I guess the one tier below it is releasing an album on Subsidia. All right, I'm gonna pull a Dora for this final stat, all right? Can you guys guess who is the artist that has appeared the most on Subsidia, all right? And I'll give you guys 5 seconds, all right? Do you know the artist? Right, it's Excision. Now you guys probably can't guess the second artist. That's right, it's Dion Timmer. No, I'm kidding. Dion Timmer's actually third. He has 17 songs. The person in second is Freaky. No, that's their name. Their name is Freaky. I'm not saying they are a freaky person or anything. Like their name is Freaky. Going down the list of artists with 10 or more tracks, you've got Wales, who released an LP that probably accounts for most of the songs, to be honest. You've got YDG, Perry Wayne, Felmax, Brainrack, High Zombie, Ahi, Vulcan, and Vastiv. And then appearances wise, it's basically indistinguishable from the singles column. Obviously, we don't have many, if any, remixes. The only distinguishing difference is that, as I mentioned earlier, the 2 remixes were of Excision songs. So artists that had remixes, Kayvon and Dubscribe, have 1 more appearance. And then Excision and Dion Timmer both have 2 more appearances on top of that. I do have one more fun fact. I believe the upcoming Excision Amity track is actually their 97th release. So if my mathematics is correct, we are very closely nearing up to the 100th Subsidia release, which I guess does kind of tie in with the 10th volume of Dusk, Night, and Dawn. And if that was planned, that was really smart of them. But also, as I mentioned earlier, Alien Park has a single coming soon, which would be number 98. So it's probably not going to be 98, 99, 100, but maybe 100 and 101 and 102. We'll see. Or maybe one mega comp with all of them together. Who knows? Anyways, TLDR, I don't think I would recommend listening to Subsidia. One of the main reasons I actually marathoned Subsidia was because I thought that by going to an Excision event, that there was going to be a lot of Excision adjacent artists. Subsidia, and that a lot of Excision adjacent music from Subsidia would be playing. And to be as cultured as possible, I should familiarize myself with the Subsidia discography to be able to maybe spot out a couple of the songs I played. You want to know how many Subsidia songs I recognized? One. I recognized one Subsidia song. Maybe two. I think I recognized two. I genuinely do not remember. And that could very well be because of the artists that I had attended. I didn't really attend that many Excision or Subsidia adjacent artists. But the one track that I did recognize was Dubscribe's Laser Sound. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about Lost Lands. What's up, y'all? It is Friday. Had to go to bed, woke up, tried filming again on Thursday. I hated the recording, plus my camera freaking died. It is now Friday, and we're gonna try again. Let's talk about Lost Lands. My previous take was 45 minutes and I did it completely off the cuff. Not a good idea. So this time I actually have some notes to reference. So as I mentioned, Lost Lands is one of 3 shows that the Excision team hosts every year. The first one is Lost Lands, which is held on the East Coast in Ohio. Base Canyon is the second one, and that's held in Washington on the West Coast, if my memory serves me correct. And the third one is Blue Paradise, which they actually just announced the lineup for, which is held in Mexico. The announcement of Lost Lands 2023 was announced all the way back in January, which is a solid 10 months ago from now, and 9 months before the actual show had happened. I always want to give props whenever teams are able to announce things and details in advance. Announcing it all the way back in January, it had some unique issues that I had never experienced before. Normally, when I have to plan for something that's in 3 months in advance, 2 months in advance, the main obstacle is obviously convincing everyone to be on board and to start booking stuff off. And hopefully, if it's work, getting that time off secured. If it's money, making sure that they're in a financially stable situation to be able to put off money for flights, for tickets, for accommodations, food, whatever. But I've never had a situation where a festival was announced so far in advance that it would have its own issues. Like, some people don't really know what they're even gonna do the next day, let alone 9 months in advance. Fortunately, me and my group of 6 other homies, we were able to eventually come together and decide that we were going to commit to it and that we needed to start planning immediately. Because even though we had 9 months to plan, there were certain things that immediately we had to decide on. One of the most annoying things, and this is not really the issue of anybody, and it is that the show is so hyped that the tickets were selling like crazy. The way it worked is they had the normal general admissions ticket, they had different tiers of VIP, and then they had tickets for if you were arriving Thursday, if you wanted to arrive Wednesday, and then for camping. And then there's 2 tiers of camping. There's renting out your own spot. You can bring your own camping equipment. You can get a lot to park in and to sleep in your car. You can do glamorous camping or glamping. We ended up just getting general admissions tickets, which is fine. And obviously that's going to be the ticket that most people are going to get. I did actually at one point consider getting a VIP ticket, but didn't end up doing that. Part of the reason is because they sold out so quickly. The more likely reason is that I wasn't really able to mentally justify it. And I mean, it was my first time. I had no expectations for the show, and I didn't want to overstep my boundaries and then end up disappointed. And to be honest, I don't feel like I missed out on anything by not having a VIP pass. So general admission was good enough for me. But the way that it worked is that the general admissions tickets were sold essentially in waves or in batches. There would be a price point and a certain number of tickets that were available. Once all of those tickets were sold, there would be the next tier of general admission, which offered the exact same thing, nothing different, but they were more expensive. And unfortunately, because we were trying to figure out all of the details, some of our group mates weren't 100% sure if they were committed to coming to the show 9 months in advance. We ended up being one of the last tiers of general admission. Another issue that came up, and again, this is not the fault of Excision at all, we are a group of 7, and the smartest thing in regards to accommodations would be to go to an Airbnb, rent out a whole house, and just make sure that it has enough beds for everybody to sleep in. And who would have thought that every single Airbnb that seemed interesting or was a good deal would be immediately snatched up by other people also looking to book 9 months in advance. We did eventually find a solid Airbnb location. The only downside was that for some reason, the owner of the house said that there was a Nintendo Switch. There was no Nintendo Switch. There was a Nintendo product. Psych, it was a third-party Nintendo product. So because of us, the Airbnb listing now says game console available. So I'm glad we were able to beta test that one.
Are we competing?
I have the same information that you do.
very quick aside while I'm on this topic, Airbnb, there's one thing that the day I discovered this blew my mind that it's even possible. You can put locations on Airbnb without fire detectors or carbon monoxide detectors. And what's even more depressing, when I go into the advanced settings and I click that the location must have a carbon monoxide detector and a smoke detector, that a solid 5% of available options immediately leave. Is it really that hard? Like, you just need one smoke detector and one carbon monoxide detector per floor. At least that's what we need in Canada. I don't know if that's any different. We have like 2 per floor in this house just for safety. Love my parents. They get paranoid that I'm living in the basement. So there's literally like 4 smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors here. So maybe I'm just too used to being surrounded by the occasional beeping. Imagine you spend like $1,000, you fly to Ohio, and the thing that kills you is carbon monoxide. Like, of all the things that could have happened, aliens abducted you, I don't know, somebody throwing something at Lost Lands, you get trampled. No, you died in your sleep at an Airbnb in Ohio from carbon monoxide. That would suck. Let's go back to the main topic at hand, Lost Lands. One of the things that I was personally at least very excited for, as somebody who is usually the lead planner for all intents and purposes of these kinds of group planning sessions, is that because the Excision team was planning out and already listing tickets so far in advance, that we would be able to be on top of this, get all the information in advance. It was going to be super cool. No, that was not quite it. We didn't get any information regarding the lineup until May, which is like 4 months later. But you know what? Fair enough. We got the lineup. That was pretty cool. I should probably very quickly revisit that by the end of January, beginning of February, basically all ticket options were completely sold out except for general admission. So if we were still on the fence, we would have probably been able to have purchased a general admissions ticket if the truly deciding factor was the lineup. We were already on board with going to Lost Lands, as it was a festival that was close to myself and many others that were interested. We had friends that were gonna go, and after the past couple of years of doing the same show, same festival, same location, we wanted something that was different, and Lost Lands was able to offer that. For those of you who don't know, I live in Toronto, Canada, and for myself, it would have been a very short flight, but my buddy Nathan, very kind homie, lives in Michigan, was willing to offer me a ride from Michigan all the way down to Ohio on 2 terms. The first one is I had to get myself to Windsor, which I did by buying a train ticket. Thank you, Via Rail. And the second condition was that I had to cover gas. Fair enough. But at least in regards to the lineup, I can kind of understand why they wouldn't want to rush this out. Imagine you publish a lineup and then suddenly artists aren't able to attend. Fair enough that they'd want to make sure that the lineup is as close to what is going to be the final. The main final details that we were missing was just basically the directions, how are we supposed to get there, where's the parking supposed to be, and perhaps as well the schedule. When are the artists going to be playing? It is inevitable with any festival that has multiple stages that there's going to be conflicts. But in the 3 days that were advertised, there were 200 sets. So obviously, we want to be able to plan that out in advance. Which artists are going to be conflicting? Is our group going to split up into 2 and maybe regroup later? Do we want to arrive perhaps later because we don't care about anybody in the morning? Or perhaps leave later at night? Half the group stays, half the group goes. And we found that out in like 2 weeks before the festival started. Actually, let me correct myself very quickly. We learned about the stages 2 weeks in advance, which artists would be playing at which stages. But when it came to which artists were playing at what days, at what time, we didn't know that until a couple days before the festival. If you guys want to see my planning, I love spreadsheets. I just put everything in a spreadsheet so I could visualize it. It was all rounded to the nearest quarter hour, so some of it is slightly off, but I mean, you know, it gets the point across. But I want to just slow down very quickly because, like I said, the original lineup advertised 200 sets in the 3-day period, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That was false advertising, and we don't really appreciate that. Because what they didn't tell you is that there were artists playing on Thursday and Wednesday. And we kind of knew that. They advertised on the store that you'd be able to purchase tickets if you were arriving perhaps a day or 2 earlier for an extra head start to the Lost Lands experience. What they didn't tell you is that the artists playing on Wednesday and Thursday were only playing Wednesday and Thursday. See, my thought was the artists playing Wednesday, Thursday would be able to have another actual set during the event, and that the Wednesday Thursday bonus was essentially just people trying to, you know, get closer to the stage. Maybe they want to see those artists twice. That's an option. And so the disappointment that myself and a number of other people in our group experienced when artists such as Leotrix, Night Punk, Butte Noise, Hamd, and a slew of other artists that were on the lineup were only Wednesday and Thursday, it just sucked. There's no words to put it. And I think this kind of comes back to communication, because had they communicated that, I think some of us, at least, not all of us, but some of us may have actually purchased the Thursday pass or the Wednesday pass. It wouldn't even surprise me if people that purchased the Wednesday pass or Thursday pass didn't know that they were suddenly getting a lot more for their purchase. Or you could even argue less, maybe, depending on if they thought that they were going to see the same artist twice. And like I said, this was my first Lost Lands experience. It could also be very probable that they did the exact same thing last year. But not everyone's going to be willing or able to put in the amount of research to go through that. At the end of the day, because we purchased the tickets all the way back in January, and they didn't announce all of this until September, it's not like we could have changed our minds. And unfortunately, it's not like we were able to get an upgrade. We just kind of had to commit to the fact that we weren't going to see some of those artists that we were so excited to see. But while I am on the topic, I do want to talk about communication just a little bit more, because throughout the festival, and this is not completely to the fault of the Excision team, it's inevitable that there are going to be some hiccups, some issues that come along the way. The main three that I'm just going to use as an example are Muzz, Achios, and Saint Miller. These three artists, for one reason or another, were not able to make their set, either the entirety of it or some of it. And at no point did I ever see, at least, that they ever advertised that those artists, for one reason or another, were not able to attend. Saint Miller was the most mysterious one, because Saint Miller was originally on the full lineup, and then when they reposted the full lineup again at a later date, Saint Miller's name was just missing. It was just gone, disappeared. My theory was that Saint Miller was going to play on Wednesday or on Thursday, because in Saint Miller's place, presumably at least, Virus Syndicate just kind of suddenly popped up out of nowhere. And to the same degree, they never really advertised that Virus Syndicate was taking over in their place. The news that I heard on the grapevine is that Muzz was having visa issues, and for that reason they weren't able to make their set. And this was news that I had heard a day or two before his actual set. But there was no official recognition or announcement of that. When you looked at the schedule, when you looked at the mobile app, which, by the way, the mobile app is okay, but they also didn't update it from the information from the year prior until, again, a few days before the actual festival. But on the app where they push out updates, where they have the schedule, they didn't update Muzz on the schedule until like the hour or two before it, when Riot was announced to replace them. Achios was pretty unfortunate as well. We were really excited to see her, but for whatever reason, their flight got delayed. They weren't able to make it for the second half of their set, which was pretty cool. But for the people that were there, we had no idea who was actually playing during that time. And I think even though this festival is 200 plus artists, there's so many moving parts, being able to just have a moment to have that sort of communication would at least bring up the level of transparency and understanding for those kinds of hiccups. And I guess for some who are a lot more passionate on some of these artists, it's very hard to get the importance across when, like I said, it's not like most people came to the festival for just one particular artist. They came because there was 200 of them. So in theory, even if one was missing, there's so many others that are playing at the same time. And I think Lost Lands really feeds into that FOMO, or fear of missing out. Lost Lands has 8 festival stages, and at most 5 stages are playing sets at the exact same time. Throughout the day, there were 3 festival stages, or 4. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm just going to put the schedule on the screen once again of what your typical Lost Lands day looked like. But after midnight, once the 2 main stages closed, the 5 smaller stages with all of the other artists that continued to play were all playing at the same time. And that was a killer for some of the conflicts. But I want to double back just a little bit, because the reason FOMO exceeds more than just after midnight is because at no point was there really ever a time to relax. Assuming you're an old boomer like myself who wants to get 8 hours of sleep, in theory, I know we're coping here. If the festival starts at 2 p.m. and ends at 4 in the morning, that leaves 10 hours, but we're completely ignoring the fact that the transportation to the festival is 1 hour one way. So that's 2 hours to traffic, but then we forgot to consider that you have to go to parking, and that's also another hour. And that's not an exaggeration. We got 2 parking passes, and part of the parking pass is transportation from the festival venue to the adjacent parking lot. and they probably had like 7 or 8 coach buses on rotation bringing people, but the highway or the road right beside the festival venue is like 1 lane. So the traffic was brutal. On Saturday, our group split into 2, and one group left earlier, and the second group, which is what I was part of, stayed later. We wanted to see a little bit of Coven, and we also wanted to see a little bit of Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill, incredible set, by the way, but I'll get into a bit more detail afterwards. I think we also went to see one more set. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but the main point is that we were leaving the grounds at 3 in the morning. We got on the coach bus at 4 in the morning, and then we got to the Airbnb at 5 in the morning. You are quite literally waking up, going to the festival, going home, and going to sleep. And then even at the festival, let's just say in theory, there was an artist that you wanted to see at every single hour and that you wanted to attend for the entire set. There was at no point, unless you were willing to make a couple sacrifices here and there, where you could actually just disconnect for just a brief moment. What some festivals do occasionally, and I kind of wish Lost Lands had, is just an hour or 2 at some point throughout the day where there's just no sets. People can go to the washroom, they can go back to their cars if they need to pick something up, they can get food, and it would actually just be a time to relax. One of the things that I saw on social media that I kind of wished I was able to see is that Lost Lands, the venue, is actually really cool. They have a lot of massive statues, a lot of opportunities for photos, cool lights and structures, and even hidden sets. Some of the stuff that went viral is that there was like a massive back-to-back with like Excision and like 4 other artists. And it was in this very tiny location where there was only like 100 people there. It was probably some sort of VIP perk. But the main thing is that there was never really a chance for exploration. I think that's personally one of my like biggest regrets is I never actually got to enjoy the actual festival venue. The only thing I was doing for the most part was making sure that none of us got lost, but then also just going to the festival sets. I think if there was 1 or 2 hours where people just had a chance to just chill, relax, talk with their friends, go see some cool stuff, actually get food, explore their options, it would have personally enhanced my experience a lot more. Something else about the venue that I did not like, on the very first day, at the very first set, one of our group mates actually got into a mosh pit and then essentially got their head kicked in and their glasses broken. I'm not going to name names. You may know, you may not know, I don't know. They were not looking that great. We were genuinely concerned that they might have had a concussion. And for the entire venue, for the thousands of people that were at that location, there was one first aid tent. That's it. And it was right beside the front gate. We were not at the front gate. We were at the other side of the front gate. And like I said, this was the very first set of the first day that we went to. So it was probably like 2, 3, 4 p.m. It's busy, but it's not like 9 p.m. prime time busy. And it took us probably 10 minutes from the stage that we were at, I think it was the Subsidia stage, we were at Beast Boy set, to walk all the way to the first aid tent to make sure that they were okay. Took us 10 minutes to walk there. That's insane. And then imagine if there was like an actual emergency. One of the things that I'll give Lost Lands props for is that they were constantly advertising that there was a lot of safe spaces for people, whether it's for people that might be on a bad trip doing drugs, or perhaps if you were having some sort of anxiety attack, or you just need a location to get away from people. They were constantly advertising that that was something you could do. There was a hotline that you could text if you needed it. But one first aid tent? Really? If we're going to talk about safety, I'm just going to briefly talk about the security as well. I remember mentioning this to some of my friends years ago when I attended EDC Orlando, and I think it's definitely gotten a lot worse as of late. As a Canadian, I think I'm pretty fortunate that I live in a society that I don't have to worry that much about gun violence. And then whenever I'm going to the States, my mom always has to have a talk about how she's concerned about, like, you never know what people are going to be carrying, and that's the fact. You don't really know. So whenever I go to these massive festivals, and especially with Lost Lands, Ohio, I'm seeing Confederate flags out here. It's pretty banger. It's definitely the United States, I'll say that. But the main point that I'm trying to get at is that I didn't feel unsafe, but I never felt safe either. There were security guards, there were a couple dogs, they were probably sniffing for something, but they weren't actually doing anything. I vividly remember when we were walking towards the security gates that the officers and their dogs were sniffing in a corner like 50 meters away from us. I don't know if drug sniffing dogs can sniff that far. I wasn't carrying anything, I'm not concerned. But the main thing is that if they were meant to be seeking something, it definitely did not look like they were actually doing anything. It was just a bunch of security theater, which is basically my experience at airport security as well. Speaking of airport security, I didn't go to an airport, but you know what I did went to? I went to the US-Canadian land border. And guess who got searched again? That's right, yo boy. I'm at like an 80% success rate. I'm always hitting those random searches. It is insane. Do not travel with me. If the border agent happens to be watching this, if I see you again, bro, I've seen you 2 times in a row, by the way. It's the guy we walked in. Nathan and I walked in, the border agent recognized us. That's how you know you've been randomly selected too many times. All right, no, once, okay, I'm unlucky. I'm unlucky at every single border point, but twice you start to recognize me. That's too much. No, y'all gotta give me some sort of free pass next time. Like, you guys trying to search me again, I gotta be like, nah, listen, I got my frequent flyers card. I'm skipping this one, all right? You guys cannot be doing this. Lost line security does not exist. There were definitely people standing in place of security, pretending to look through your bag that I didn't unzip, or checking my pockets for liquids that I was bringing in. And these metal detectors, which don't seem to detect metal, but you know, who am I to disagree? At the end of the day, I'm very fortunate, and I guess everyone else is also very fortunate that nothing actually bad happened at Lost Lands. But in the meantime, I guess I'm just gonna have to keep rolling the dice and hoping things are fine the way they are. Damn, that was a little bit morbid, my bad. You know what was cool? Smoke. Let's talk about smoke really quickly as well, since we're on the topic of health. There were 2 types of smoke. Smoke from machines and smoke from people. And there is a lot of smoke. If you are asthmatic, which I think one of the people on our group were, I'm not 100% sure, but if you are asthmatic, not the greatest place. I mean, I guess I shouldn't necessarily be surprised, but the main thing that I wasn't surprised about people like smoking weed or anything, all right? That was kind of a given, even though it's not legal in Ohio. By the way, I was not doing that, all right? I'm looking at you, border agent. I know you're looking at me. But the thing that I was personally surprised at is that I was pretty frequently very close to the front of the sets, and there were fog machines and smoke machines. And the reason for these smoke machines is probably, you know, to set the mood, it's cool effects, all of the massive lasers that are shooting throughout the sky, they need something to collide in the air. And that's what smoke essentially adds, is as a vessel for these lasers to be visible. Because if there's no smoke, there's no dust, there's nothing. All the lasers are doing is just shooting way past you until it hits a wall or it hits a tree. So I'm at the front rail, and these smoke machines, you'd think, well, if they're supposed to be visible for the lasers, they should be pointing up. No, they were pointed directly at the people, which means that when I was at the Subsidia stage enjoying Effin, and then A Sora, and then Frost Top back to back, all 1 hour long sets, I was inhaling smoke from a fog machine for 3 hours. That is not good. And the way I know it was not good is I went home that night, I blew my nose, and it took 10 minutes to flush out all of my sinuses, and it was completely pure black. I'm not going to include a photo. I'm glad I didn't take a photo. But that's disgusting, and that's not healthy at all. And I think even without the smoke and fog machines, which, like I said, they should have been pointed up. They just shouldn't be pointed at people. I don't know why they pointed them at people that were at the front. But a second thing is that the venue was a very dry location. There was no rain, so I mean, we can't really complain. We got very nice weather. It was sunny during the day, and it wasn't that cold, at least when it wasn't nighttime. But because of that, whenever there was a mosh pit, there's people dancing, there's people moving, walking, massive dust clouds come up. And that's also just destroying your lungs. When I used to be a competitive swimmer, there was this one swimming pool that we used to swim at, and it had a very high chlorine content in the pool. And what happened is, whenever we were swimming, we were splashing the water, we were kicking, the chlorine particles would actually disconnect from the water and would become airborne. And so by the end of our sets that we'd be swimming, we would all be in massive coughing fits, our eyes would be red. It was not fun. Now imagine that same experience, but over the course of 3 12-hour days. It was brutal. And I think some people would be very quick to dismiss, like at least if you're a frequent festival goer, to be like, oh, well, you know, that's just the festival experience. Like I said, this isn't my first festival experience. I've been to EDC Orlando twice. The climate is definitely probably different, but I've had nowhere near as uncomfortable of an experience in regards to smoke and dust as I did at Lost Lands. Let's get some pros, some good stuff in, because I definitely feel like I've just been trashing Lost Lands a lot. Like I said, I think there was a lot that was pretty respectable and pretty cool of Lost Lands. Like I said, I definitely enjoyed the theming, all right? All the dinosaur, prehistoric imagery that was going on. In regards to festival attendee safety and well-being, like I said, I was at the front pretty consistently, and one of the really cool things that they were doing is that you know, obviously if you're at the very front, you don't want to lose your spot. And so that means if you're staying at the front for an extended period of time and you're thirsty, you run out of water, they were actually giving you free bottles of water. They weren't even charging you for it. And so I definitely got to give them thumbs up for that, because otherwise, you know, if you weren't getting free water, you either had to bring an empty bottle, bring a camel pack backpack, which essentially just stores water for you, and you'd either have to go to the free refill station, which, by the way, very short line. I was very impressed and very happy about that. The free refill station was very quick, but the alternative is to buy water, which was only $2 as well. When I'm comparing it to my previous festival experiences, it's not surprising to see bottled water at $5 or even $10. And by the way, for my Canadian viewers out there, this is not Canadian, this is USD, all right? You're essentially just doubling Canadian at that point. Are you doubling it? No, you're not doubling it, but like 1.3, 1.5, that's the exchange rate. After taxes would be like 1.4, so 1.3. It's not cheap. You'd rather just dehydrate at that point. But yeah, I think I've hit most of the points. I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is not a bad thing about Excision, this is completely my experience, and I guess some pro tips in that regard. On Thursday, as we were going down to Ohio, I got sick. And it wasn't like COVID, it wasn't like car sickness or anything like that. It was just like the common like cold or whatever, right? I had sniffles, I was coughing, sneezing, whatever. Now, when you're going to a festival that is 3 days long, you are not getting enough sleep, you are yelling, you are cheering, dancing, you know, getting hyped. You're basically on adrenaline the entire day. During the daytime, it's sunny like crazy. You want to make sure to bring sunscreen. Fortunately, we did. We also got bug spray, but we didn't actually have that much need for it. We thought we were in the forest, right? There was a lot of trees. We thought there was gonna be a bunch of mosquitoes. I did not get bit by anything, so that was cool. But you definitely want to bring sunscreen. But then as the night came, if you didn't bring a sweater or a jacket or a second layer of clothing, it got cold. And on Saturday, that day when I said we didn't get home until 5 in the morning, I forgot my sweater at home. That was bad. Listen, all I'm saying is from 3 in the morning when we were leaving till like noon the next day, I have like no recollection of what happened. I somehow made it home, and that's all that mattered. When I was telling my mom about it, like when I came back, one of the things that I was mentioned was that I was just permanently cold, right? I was basically outside in like 5-degree weather, 5 Celsius, by the way, not Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, somewhere here, whatever. We got back to Nathan's car. I'm in Nathan's car. He turns on the heater, I'm still cold. We got home, I got in the shower, I cranked up the hot water, I was still cold. I was in bed with 4 blankets, I was still cold. It was bad. I somehow fell asleep. My mom theorizes that I might have had a fever that night, which I guess is very plausible, but I don't know how to check if I have fever. My mom just puts the back of her hand on my forehead and is just like, yep, you've got fever. And I'm touching myself and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. But the main point is, next day, obviously, I'm not skipping that festival. I'm going right back to the front. What is my main thesis? Bring appropriate clothing. T-shirt during the day, some sunscreen, bring a sweater or jacket at night. I was wearing long jeans the entire festival, so I never had any issues with my legs, like I didn't bring any shorts. I skipped over it very quickly, but dust. Everything that I wore turned brown. So either bring extra clothing or be ready to wash that same clothing to use it for the next day. And yeah, would I recommend Lost Lands? I think I would definitely recommend Lost Lands as a festival that you'd want to go to at least once. But now that I have gone once, I don't think I would do it again. And that's just because personally, I do about 1 festival a year, and that's about it. And so I don't necessarily want to do the same festival twice if I don't have to. That said, I would definitely be open to doing another Excision held festival, whether it's Base Canyon on the West Coast or Blue Paradise in Mexico, which they did just announce tickets for, and they also announced at the exact same time the lineup, which is something that I kind of wish they did for Lost Lands. But hey, I digress. I mean, the Blue Paradise lineup is a lot smaller, and it was announced 6 months instead of 9 months in advance, so I mean, you can't really compare apples to oranges here, but it is what it is. I was gonna stop recording and just take a break, continue recording this tomorrow, because I still need to do some sort of outro or conclusion segment. And listen, it's Friday, all right? I pre-ordered, I bought Mario Wonder, I was so hyped, but I need to finish this video about Excision. Also, yeah, I changed clothes, all right? What's up, y'all? I'm back with another post-edit insert. This time I actually have a few things that I didn't include in the original Lost Lands section. Most of them are just certain points that I had wanted to include and I completely forgot. But after watching back my recording, I realized I also just completely left out a large portion of the video that I thought people would be more interested in, which is my actual experience meeting up with my friends. Because not only is this really a review of the label, of the show, and of the Excision brand, but I do also like to talk about the trips that I had, even if they might not necessarily be as related. I do have timestamps in the description if you guys wanted to skip around, but I will just get straight to the actual points that I wanted to highlight first. I wasn't originally going to include this topic because I considered it a bit inside baseball. It wasn't really something that a lot of people I think knew about unless you were in the industry. And it's about the topic of artists not making a profit when playing shows. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of most of the show business. Most artists that have to travel to a show, and a singular show, are probably not going to be making a net profit. And this includes Lost Lands. This probably isn't necessarily the case for people that are already an American and living in the country and are able to just travel there on a cheaper budget. But when you scale it up, especially overseas artists are the ones that are definitely going to be struggling. Obviously, I don't know what playing at Lost Lands entails when it comes to what's covered, such as accommodations and amenities. This also obviously definitely changes depending on what time you play and what stages you play. All of the artists playing the main stages, that being Wampy Woods and the prehistoric stage, are more than likely going to be netting positive. It's all of the other artists that are playing at all the other stages that are probably not going to fare as well. For a lot of people, the justification is that it's just kind of par for the sport. Even if they might not net positive on this trip, they're already getting a free admission. They might be saving money than if they were just a person attending the show in general. And there's also obviously the conversation about the exposure that you will get. People starting to recognize your name, hearing your music for the first time. It can be a priceless experience. The reason I decided to include this was for two reasons. The first one is that I saw an EDM iceberg, and one of the items on that iceberg was Lost Lands underpaying. I thought it was a bit interesting because obviously there's a lot of electronic lineups, and for whatever reason Lost Lands was isolated in particular. Like I said earlier, a very unfortunate part of this whole thing is that this is not a Lost Lands exclusive thing. This is something that's not even exclusive to the EDM scene. This is just something that will happen at any sort of large festival. But the reason I also decided to include this more so is because I had heard that apparently some artists are actually paying to be on the lineup. We've gone past artists not making enough from the show. We're now into the part where people are going to net negative and paying more to be on the lineup. I had mentioned earlier in the video that one of my biggest critiques is that I think Lost Lands just had a few too many artists, and that it would have been beneficial for the show to maybe have one less stage, or to have certain hours of the day where there were no artists playing, so that people attending the show could actually appreciate and take time off to check out the venue, get some food, use the washroom, talk to just your friends, etc. And as an attendee, knowing how much that I paid for my ticket, knowing how much people are paying for their tickets, not only just general admission, but we're talking about VIP, the different levels of camping, glamping, parking pass. I'm not going to consider myself or say that I am an authority of live shows and hosting events to this scale. I have no idea how much this costs. This definitely will probably cost a lot. But knowing that there were probably thousands of attendees at this show, just having to think about how much money they probably received from everybody attending, all of the money that came from food, from additional merchandise, and that we still had artists, not even going to be mentioning how artists were not netting positive or that they were breaking even, but that there were artists that were paying to be on the lineup. It just rubs me the wrong way. And like I said earlier, this could definitely be a debated topic and not really one that I'm going to entertain in this video, since you can't really quantify, but that there is a value on the exposure that you will get playing at a festival of this size, despite how much being paid and exposure is a meme in this sort of industry. But I think that if Excision is going to be this beacon of the great that an artist-led initiative and festival can be done, that the artist, Excision, has to also think about the artists that he's bringing on. And it's also interesting because when you look at historically the price of Lost Lands tickets, they used to be way cheaper. So knowing that the Lost Lands ticket is way more expensive than it has been historically, that apparently there were better amenities in the past, and that there are still artists not breaking even, and that there are artists that are paying to be on the lineup, it just does not feel right. And I also just want to really quickly rehash This is alleged. I do not have any proof or receipts, so you guys can take all of what I said with a grain of salt. But artists not making enough money to break even is a common industry, I wouldn't even say secret, it's just a known fact. So make of that what you will. So I want to talk about the silent disco. Now, if you don't know what the silent disco is, the way that I like to describe it is that there's a DJ named Silent Disco who has like 2 sets every day lasting for 4 hours. This guy's playing 8 hours a day for the entire festival and more. Now that's what I wish it was, but it is not that. The whole thing was sarcasm. What silent discos actually are, if you haven't seen them, and you've probably seen some viral clips of them, is imagine you're at a venue. Everyone wears headphones and you will hear the music through the headphones. There's no speakers. It's a very unique take on the live show experience, and I think it's a really cool one. It's probably a lot more expensive having to purchase enough headphones to give to everybody. But some of the benefits include noise pollution being a lot less of an issue. Hearing damage is also less of a concern. Each person can adjust the volume independently. Why am I talking about this? On the lineup, silent disco had dedicated times, and there was usually from like 8 in the morning or like 10 in the morning all the way until 2 p.m. when the actual show starts. From there's no silent disco until about 10 p.m. where it keeps going and returns until 4 in the morning. If there were no more artists that were playing that you were interested in, you could go check out the silent disco. But there was never really an established lineup for the silent disco. It was just silent disco. There was gonna be music playing. To be honest, I just thought that they were gonna put a Spotify playlist on shuffle. I was never able to find out who or what was playing at silent disco, just that it existed. I also wasn't sure if people with general admission were allowed to get to it, because I think you had to go to the actual campground area to attend the silent disco. Maybe I'm completely mistaken. That's probably a part of my lack of research, or the lack of information that was available. But right before the festival started, a second post about a local lineup showed up. And I was very confused because this was an entire like other 100 artists that were just at Lost Lands. So 200 artists, 210 acts that were playing was already huge to begin with. And now we have a whole other 100 or so artists. I don't know any of these people. I mean, these are obviously local, but that are part of the Grove stage, which is where the silent disco was. So now I'm personally confused because the silent disco was never advertised as a 24/7 stage, but now it suddenly was. And even if I did want to attend the set of one of these local lineups, I had absolutely no idea when any of these artists were playing. And it was also confusing because I know that that wasn't the exclusive artist list that was playing at the silent disco, because I knew that some of the people that had actual sets at Lost Land also had sets at the silent disco. That being Chime and AU5, I think, had a pop-up silent disco set. And then the likes of Astral Descent, I think, also had a pop-up set, which was really cool to hear. But again, just complete lack of information as to what was the change, why the change happened, and what kind of information was supported for me to check this out. And then again, leads it back into our discussion on FOMO. Anybody who went to Lost Lands with me would be able to vouch for me. The silent disco was actually one of the sets that I wanted to see really badly, and I never got to see the silent disco. It never just lined up for us. Mainly because I had never seen a silent disco before. But as a joke for the entire festival, I was saying, damn, I really want to see the DJ silent disco. They're probably so good at this. But yeah, I quickly just wanted to cover this because, again, at this point, I just feel like the more you realize what you missed, the more questions come up than answers. It also does make me wonder if the allegation that I mentioned earlier about people paying to be on a Lost Lands lineup had partially in part with this local lineup. If anything, the people on here probably have the most to earn on being on a Lost Lands lineup. Even if it's just a local lineup, you are establishing validity to the name here. And let me tell you, I do not recognize a single name on here. So big ups to the local lineup. If you happen to be watching this video, I'm sorry I couldn't check out your set, but I do blame Lost Lands and the Excision team that I had no idea about any of this. This was like one singular Twitter post. I have no idea if this was posted anywhere else. While I'm remembering right now, one of my biggest criticisms with the Lost Lands venue is that there was not really any meaningful sitting areas. A lot of the sitting areas were very far away from festival stages or just kind of in the corner of the venue. Most of your sitting would have had to have been on the inflatable couches that you would have had to have bought, or you'd just be sitting on the floor. Some of the stages did have very high hills that you could sit on. So that was an option. Didn't really get to try that out. As for locations to eat, there were a few picnic benches, but like only a few. Definitely wish Excision and his team had brought out more seating accommodations. My legs were killing me. And then for the last thing that I missed, but that I do want to include, I did want to talk about the festival experience on my end. And I guess this might be a little bit sentimental and a little bit unrelated at certain points, so if this isn't of interest, then like I said, feel free to skip. Timestamps are in the description. One of the biggest things when it comes to me justifying the cost of attending a music festival such as Monster Cat Compound, EDC Orlando, Lost Lands, and any festivals that I will attend in the future is something that you can't really include in the actual cost or worth or value of the trip. And that's the people that I'm going to be attending with, hanging out with, sharing rooms with, and maybe even the people that I'm going to be able to get to know on the trip. As I mentioned almost at the very beginning of this video, the festival that we attend is obviously a huge consideration on a lot of the things that we plan around, but at the end of the day, the music festival is more of a medium at which we use to meet up as a group of online friends. If I didn't have online friends or people into electronic music to attend with, I probably wouldn't really feel any reason or encouragement to attend Lost Lands. The reason I attended Lost Lands is obviously for the artists that were there and for the price that it was available for and for the experience that Lost Lands has to offer. But the bigger thing for me was all of the people that I was going to be hanging out with, all of the people that I was going to meet. I got to hang out with some of the homies that are friends of the channel that you guys probably recognize from previous videos like Athani and Prime Ordnance. But then I got to meet some new people. I want to give a shout out to _Quantum and Ezwin. But this year in particular was a very new experience for me. When I went to EDC Orlando, the only people that I was meeting were the people that I was going to be rooming up with. So we had the likes of Redhawk, Cad, Kayla, Monster, now known as Orionic. And when attending Monster Cat Compound, I did get to meet a lot of friends, but I also got to meet the Monster Cat staff. There are a lot of Monster Cat staff that I had gotten to know over the years online, and getting to meet them in person was a very unique experience that I treasure greatly. And so this year I got to hang out with all of my friends, but I also got to meet up with a lot of people from the bass music scene and the color bass scene that I'd gotten to become really cool friends with. I had met up with Paper Skies and Skybreak at a Toronto show before, but getting to see them again was really cool. Meeting Chime was also a really cool experience after everything that they have done for giving a platform for our discography mashups. I also got to meet this other small YouTuber. He's gonna blow up one day. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's named Connor Whitmore of the Naughty Step channel. The person that I was definitely most excited to meet for the first time though was Landon, more formally known on YouTube as Landon Remixes. We've chatted on and off for years at this point, so finally get to meet the homie in person was really cool. But it's those kinds of experiences with friends that I put the most amount of value into the trip, and that's not really something that you can quantify. And so whenever I talk about how much I would recommend going to a show, I always have this from the lens of going with other people. If I was to do this completely by myself, I don't think I would have enjoyed this trip at all, no matter what was recommended. If I was to imagine doing these trips, not just Lost Lands, but other trips in general, I don't think I would have the same level of fondness or excitement that I did. Monster Cat Compound is a bit different. My history with Monster Cat just makes it seem like the sort of religious expedition that you have to do at some point if you were a true Monster Cat fan. And I mean, my first trip to Monster Cat Compound was by myself. It was when I won the mix contest in 2018. So it is a bit different in that regard. But I couldn't see myself attending a Lost Lands or an EDC Orlando or any EDC or Excision show for that matter by myself. I feel like the only show I would ever consider attending by myself would be something to the likes of Tomorrowland. And that's just because Tomorrowland is essentially the final frontier of EDM fests. So when I say in these videos that I'm personally able to justify spending hundreds of dollars, American by the way, not Canadian, on going to the middle of freaking nowhere in Ohio for a music festival that probably gave me health complications, at the end of the day, it wasn't the festival that was going to make the experience great. It was going to be the people that I met and that I hung out with. If it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have remembered Lost Lands in that high of a regard. At some times, I was truly miserable at Lost Lands. But at the end of the day, the trip is what you make of it, and I'm very fortunate to have a really cool community and group of friends to be with. So yeah, I guess make of that what you will. This is going to be edited in post, so I don't know if I'm going to include what I'm about to say later or if I'd already said it, but I'm going to say it now. Lost Lands is a festival that I will not be attending again. but it is not a festival that I regret attending by any means. And if people were on the fence of attending Lost Lands, I would still recommend it as a festival that you should attend at least once. But after that one time, I don't think I'm really interested in going back there. To get the video on a bit more of a lighthearted note, I quickly wanted to review every single set that I had attended or that I had passed by that I remember. I'm going to start off with Hole. Hole is my first regret. I wish that I attended his set. I really wanted to hear Country Rhythm, but we ended up going to Beast Boy. Beast Boy, no offense, you are unfortunately the person that I had the least enjoyable experience with at Lost Lands. Part of it was, like I mentioned earlier, one of our friends getting their head and glasses kicked in a mosh pit. But unfortunately, you didn't really play the music that I was hoping you'd play, and your homies behind the deck would just not stop wheeling back tracks. I'm willing to give artists one backspin as a forgiveness, but you had like 4, and we only attended half of your set, so there were probably more. Fortunately, it was all uphill from there. We caught the end of Francis Durrell's set, which was pretty alright. Some of our group didn't want to watch AU5 and Chime, at least for the entirety of it, so they went to go see Blank, but I sat through the entirety of AU5 and Chime. Definitely a huge recommend, cannot recommend enough. Around this time, I think we also went to go get a little bit of food and also checked out Company and Calcium just a little bit before heading over to Temenite. Temenite was also a really cool experience. Unfortunately, the stage was a very dusty one. We were standing all the way at the back so that we could avoid the massive dust cloud there. But the music was a lot of fun, the throwbacks were really cool, and the banter and stage visuals, the storytelling, all of it super enjoyable. Great job, Temenite. I think around here we also were going to go get food. We briefly passed by Jessica Autofred's and the Lazy B2B, as well as Flux Pavilion's Sunset set before attending the Black Tiger Sex Machine set. BTSM was a set that I was super excited to see. It was my favorite set at EDC Orlando the last time I went, and so I was super hyped up. I hyped them up like crazy, and unfortunately they did disappoint me quite a bit this time. I wish I also went in a bit more. They are debuting this anime graphics visuals, but the visuals are super underwhelming. It's just a bunch of like 3D assets that I felt like I recognized some of them from. I'm not really much of an anime fan, but I'm not gonna use that as a point of criticism. It's not like I would have been surprised. They literally advertised it on social media as an anime set. So I had absolutely no issues with it being anime. I just thought the graphics and visuals were not that great, and that where they tried to make up for it in storytelling, it suffered greatly at their track selection. From there, I think we went to get food again, and then we went to Keizo's set. I don't remember attending Keizo's set. I think I was there briefly, and then I ended up just going to one of the sitting areas where we were able to warm up because there was like live fire. The main set that I was super excited for was Boombox Cartel. I feel a little bit bad for Boombox Cartel. After Keizo finished, everybody started leaving, but on the bright side, because everybody was leaving, I was able to get all the way right up to the front, and it was a lot of fun attending his set. Although I feel like the music that he was playing didn't mirror the music that I was expecting, at least from some of the sets that I had seen him play and that were uploaded to YouTube a year or two ago. Still a very enjoyable experience though. Some of our friends split halfway into the Boombox Cartel set and left home. I stayed with the others, and before heading home ourselves, we wanted to stop by the Mr. Bill and Coven sets. It's not really a secret amongst my community that I'm not too big a fan of Coven. I feel like a lot of their music is very samey and doesn't really quite pack a punch, unfortunately. I will give Katie a massive benefit though. Her voice is very powerful, and I think that's a huge asset. And so knowing that Katie does the sets for Coven and that she does live singing, I thought it was super cool to see her really pop off in what I feel like is an environment that was just built for her. She was made to perform, and she was doing amazingly. I also thought it was really cool that she played instrumental tracks so that she could actually sing over them and you could hear her sing. Unfortunately, whoever wired up her stage didn't consider feedback, so sometimes you could get some pretty bad feedback. And by feedback, I mean like the audio was looping. On the plus side though, they were pretty on top of that, so that was pretty good. Mr. Bill wins my favorite set of Lost Lands. I put a lot of thought into this, but honestly, the stage visuals were super unique. And after an entire day of like super bloody zombies, dying, skulls, metal, barbed wire, just seeing something cute and cartoonish was a really nice change of pace. Paired up with a lot of really cool Mr. Bill music that I enjoyed hearing, some other tunes that I was super excited to hear, and also Cat Jam being animated as a stage visual. To be honest, it made my night. I also just wanted to quickly recount the story because it was really funny. but I was recording a part of Mr. Bill's set for the festival montage that will be at the end of this video, and Going Quantum, at some point while I was recording that, started apparently staring at me for like almost a minute because he thought he could recognize me, but didn't know from what he recognized me from. He met up with us and then he stayed with us for the rest of the set, so that was super cool. Had we stayed at Lost Lands longer, I would have liked to have seen Perry Wayne or One True God, but that meant we would have had to have stayed for another 2 hours, and at that point we felt like we had enjoyed most of the Lost Lands experience to go home. Saturday we decided that we were going to arrive at the festival event later. The reason we didn't arrive even later than the time that we did, which was around 5 to 5:30 p.m. was because there was a color-based meetup that a lot of us were promoted as being on the lineup for. So for an entire hour, myself, Prime Ordnance, and a lot of other color-based adjacent homies were there for the meetup. And it was really cool finally seeing, I guess, my peers face to face and getting to do photos and just chatting it up. Had it not been for the color-based meetup, I would have attended Yuki unapologetically. We were, however, aiming to go see Akios after the color-based meetup. Unfortunately, as I had mentioned earlier in the video, Akios was not able to attend the first half of the set, and when they did show up, they weren't really playing the music that I was hoping that they were going to be playing, so my experience was not that great, unfortunately. I might try another Akio set in the future, but I guess we'll see. From there, we went to the Wampy Wood stage where Borgor and Level Up were doing a back-to-back. The reason we went to go see them, along with us also getting food, is afterwards, Shaquille O'Neal, aka Diesel, was going to be playing. Diesel had a conflict with Peekaboo, and I really wanted to also see Peekaboo, but Diesel just seemed more like the kind of artist that I would not get to see play more often than Peekaboo. Shaquille O'Neal is an incredible performer and showman, but the music he played I unfortunately didn't really care for. I don't think I will see another Shaquille O'Neal set. However, I would still recommend that people see him at least once. He does love his mosh pits. Diesel also had another conflict, that being with Cohen Sound. After the Diesel set, I did go and check out Cohen Sound, and unfortunately I do really feel like even though I wanted to see Diesel, and that Diesel to me was the artist that would be harder to see in the future, I do still have a minor amount of regret not going to see Peekaboo and then Cohen Sound more. I'm realizing I forgot to mention I actually went to go see Ivy Lab, not Borgor and Level Up. Ivy Lab was pretty cool. After Cohen Sound, we stayed a little bit to check out Netski or Netsky, I don't know how it's pronounced. But when we went over to Nightmare, which was the actual artist that we were going to check out, not that enjoyable. There was a lot of songs that I was hoping he would play and he didn't. He played a lot of music and then would just switch it at the drop to a different song that I didn't really care for. Overall, don't think I'll be seeing Nightmare again. Saw a little bit of Sullivan King and that was kind of cool. The entire 2 hours from Sullivan King and then the set afterwards, I didn't really care for. I think after Sullivan King, we went to go check out Subfocus, but at that point, I was also just using it as an opportunity to go get some food. 1 p.m. brought about Effin, but I really wanted to see Little Texas because when I went to EDC Orlando, I also wanted to see Little Texas, but I was outnumbered by the people that wanted to just go home that night. It was also raining, so I don't necessarily blame people for wanting to not attend Little Texas back in 2019. But this year, I knew that I wanted to attend Little Texas, just because I don't even listen to that kind of music, but it was the very high power octane kind of music and kind of set experience that I wasn't going to get at any other artist. And yeah, I would definitely attend another Little Texas set for like 15 minutes. I don't think I would really enjoy attending a full Little Texas set, but like micro-dosing on Little Texas I think is healthy for the soul. That said, also by far the sweatiest in attendance. A lot of sweaty Little Texas fans. You will probably get a workout, I guess. I was not really moving that much. Went back after Little Texas to go check out Effin. Afterwards, I was basically just camping the Subsidia stage. Stayed for the entirety of Ace Aura, followed by Frost Top. Both super great sets. Aside from the Subsidia stage having smoke machines pointed directly at us, I think there would have been a very plausible chance that if it wasn't for the smoke machines, Ace Aura or Frost Top may have been my favorite set. But unapologetically, my favorite set will still and stay with Mr. Bill. Some of our group also split up from Frost Top to go check out what would have been Muzz, but was actually Riot. I was a little bit confused because the theme of the Forest stage that day was DNB. Every single act was DNB. So Riot not being a DNB act would have kind of, I guess, thrown a wrench in the flow. But apparently they did play quite a bit of DNB and they did play Overkill. It would have been nice to hear Overkill live, but I don't really feel like I missed out too much. especially because I have seen Riot before. Sunday was super rough because with this late night Saturday that we had, arriving back at our Airbnb at 5 in the morning, we wanted to be at Lost Lands for 2 p.m. for Godlands. Unfortunately, we did not make it. There was a lot of traffic and then parking. We did make it for the very beginning of Grabbits, and from there, the entire day was basically just staying at Wampy Woods and then halfway switching over to the prehistoric stage. We did Grabbits, followed by more Kismet, then Trifecta, then Kill the Noise, and about a few songs into Kill the Noise switched over to Kaiwachi, followed by the Virtual Riot B2B with Barely Alive, and then from there, most of us didn't really care to stay anymore. We did go check out Crystal Skies for a bit, but afterwards it was just basically heading home. Grabbits, super enjoyable. I feel like it's worth mentioning that Grabbits also sang over his music, but he didn't sing over instrumentals. I still want to kind of give that benefit and that shout out to Coven, who was the only person that sang over instrumentals. Grabbits, on the other hand, sang over his own music, but I mean, hey, it was still really cool. He played a lot of really old music, played VIPs of music, played a lot of new music too. Would see it again. There were a couple of random songs that he would just play that were completely different and kind of ruined the vibe, or at least the flow of the music, but I would still recommend. More Kismet was super cool, and I loved the spread of genres that More Kismet had. A lot of super cool mashups, super cool edits. Trifecta I didn't really care for. We just happened to watch Trifecta because they were right after More Kismet. I was hoping that he would play a bit of his older discography, since I'm not really as familiar with his newer stuff, but unfortunately just didn't really play that much. Kill the Noise I also didn't really quite care for. The only song that I was hoping that he would play and that he did play very early on was Ultraviolent. Not a Monster Cat release. Kaiwachi was really cool. I was in the middle of my Subsidia marathon at that point, and I kind of did want to see Kaiwachi. I do wish I got to see a bit more of it. But obviously the highlight of the day was going to be the Virtual Riot back-to-back with Barely Alive, and I enjoyed it pretty thoroughly. Although I feel like there was two big issues, one with Barely Alive and one with Virtual Riot. Virtual Riot was definitely having a Skrillex streak, so there were a ton of Skrillex edits, inclusions, mashups. Some cool ones, some that I just felt like missed the mark a bit. As for Barely Alive, I think the big issue was similarly to Nightmare, there was a lot of drop switches that just were not that great. At least with the drop switches with Barely Alive, he was using like very old 80s, 70s music and then dropping into a dubstep track, as opposed to Nightmare, who would use popular EDM tracks and then drop into other popular EDM tracks. At the end of the day, Virtual Riot did play the unnecessary edit of Redline, and that just made my entire week. I also, for this set, decided for myself that I wanted to go to the front regardless of if anybody else wanted to come with me. So I was very, very close, maybe a few rows from the front by myself. And fortunately, everything went swimmingly, no issues. Definitely might try to start doing that a bit more often, just having a bit more courage in going to the front of these festivals by myself. I didn't want to risk splitting up with the group, but when nobody wanted to go closer for Virtual Ride and Barely Alive, I decided that I was going to take a bit of a risk, and fortunately it paid off. And I mean, my data was working well, and we had established very clearly our meetup areas, so I wasn't too worried about even if I was to get split up from the group. Crystal Skies was alright, didn't really care for them, but I mean, they're alright. And then, yeah, that is my quick, not so quick review on all the sets I attended. I wish I got to see Godlands and Vastiv, but it is what it is. Hopefully next time. So, I reviewed the Subsidia record label, I reviewed Lost Lands, and I guess the last thing I kind of have to review would be, I guess, the Excision project as a whole, and then my concluding thoughts. And even though my thesis for this entire video is completely founded on the Excision trifecta, that being Excision as an artist and a brand, Excision's record label, and Excision's live festival and productions, I only have experience with two of them. Subsidia, which I've gone through completely. I consider myself to be pretty well-rounded. The second one is Lost Lands, which I've only done one Lost Lands, and I have not done Blue Paradise or Base Canyon. So while I don't have the experience of a veteran who has gone for many years now, I would like to at least hope that my experience as a beginner in the Excision universe is somewhat worth listening to, at least the bonus tips that I provided. And I guess I didn't really provide that much feedback aside from including periods in your festival where people can actually take a break and do other things that isn't listening to music, which I know is kind of antithetical to a music festival, but may probably actually improve the overall experience for other people. If you have more to offer than just music, I would personally want the people attending to be able to experience those other things and not just not be able to experience something. or at least a period where there are maybe perhaps less shows going on at the same time. The second one is all of the maps that were provided were not helpful in any sort of meaningful way. They designed their own maps, which were pretty, but because we're using things like Apple Maps or Google Maps, there was no real life architecture or pinpoints that we could reference. We got lost even though we had the actual instructions, and that area is a cell dead zone. Surprisingly, my international roaming was better than some of my local US phone plans of the group mates with me. Canada dub. But I remember seeing this in one of the feedback posts that I saw on Reddit while I was researching, perhaps adding actual physical location coordinates or Google and Apple links that people could click on so that they knew exactly where to drive to. We probably drove into 3 people's house driveways while looking for instructions or thinking we actually found the right location. And then the third one, which is just the feedback that I feel like I give with everything, is it's just better communication. And definitely to not do false advertising, not a fan of that. I'm more than happy to be completely proven wrong. Maybe I did miss the one post, but I scrolled back months and months of promotion and marketing material, and I could not at one point find anything that said that people playing on Wednesday and Thursday wouldn't be playing the other days. And also it wouldn't have mattered because by the time that sort of marketing material would have came out, the Wednesday, Thursday passes were long sold out. It didn't matter. So that was just poor planning on Excision's team as well. But I think Lost Lands compared to Base Canyon and Blue Paradise is the largest of the 3. So I feel like some of the hurdles that may have had to have been accounted for at Lost Lands are hurdles that may not account for Base Canyon, and definitely not for Blue Paradise, which isn't like the standard festival that people would go to. It's actually at a resort. So in regards to accommodations, you're getting the top of the top experience. I think it'd be pretty hard to mess up unless the resort that you are staying at messes up. In regards to Subsidia, I'm just gonna keep it pretty plain. Most of the music, and by most I would say 60% of the music, is either not good, like objectively speaking from a production level, or because so much music is signed from so many people that have not established certain sounds, at least on the compilations. The EPs are more sonically unique, so in that regard it's not as bad, but the compilations especially, it all just sounds very samey. It's very hard to stand out unless you stand out very well, and sometimes even the people that do stand out for the very wrong reasons. However, if you are down to sit through 650 or so songs, you will find diamonds in the rough. And like I said earlier in this video, I have included a link in the description to a playlist of my personal favorites from my Subsidia marathon, and I would like to actually continue updating that. And so whenever Night, Dusk, and Dawn Volume 10 come out, I definitely want to, keep updating that as it goes along. But as I was saying, those are my thoughts for the 2 points of the Excision trifecta. The third one, the Excision brand, I'm a complete noob. I don't really have experience. I've heard like 4 Excision songs. Let's see if I can name them. We got Bring the Madness with Pegboard Nerds. There's one Dion Timmer collab, and I know that does not narrow it down at all because they collab a lot. I think it's called Final Boss. I really like that track, but that was released ages ago. And then the Illenium collab, Stupid Love. I don't think it's actually called Stupid Love, but I think that's the title in parentheses. Those 3 Excision tracks, but specifically the Dion Timmer and the Illenium track, I love them. They are my favorites from Excision. Unfortunately, they are also not really the tracks that Excision produces anymore. The music that I have since heard in the modern, age of Excision is the one collaboration with Sullivan King on the Monster Cat LP. I heard the Excision Onyx LP, which at best I liked one song and then could tolerate another song. And then of course I heard all of the other Excision collaborations, and generally speaking, not for me. Let's just put it that way, not for me. I liked the Uber, I don't know if that's how you pronounce their name. I like the Uber collab, like the drum and bass collab. That was sick. Uber really brought out the best in Excision. Unfortunately, I can't really say that for many other tracks. But I think, as I've mentioned earlier, Excision is so much more than the music that he produces nowadays. He is his own enterprise, his own company, his own just league. And I think regardless of people's opinions on Excision, to be the level that Excision is at, not only being completely successful, but being able to uplift other people's careers and doing the good that he does, is something that many other artists wish they could achieve. And so regardless of if you love him, if you hate him, if you don't care for him, there is a level of respect that I can definitely send towards Excision and his team's way. And I guess that's that on that. I'm gonna conclude the video here. This is probably a very long video, so I'm very sorry, but also I kind of hope that you guys just enjoyed listening to me. As I said earlier in the video, I am going to be throwing in a bunch of just B-roll that I had recorded from the trip. Most of it is just festival footage, and I'm definitely going to try to include at least one clip of every set that I attended. So if you guys are looking for inspiration of what sets to attend, or want to just listen to some cool IDs, you guys will be able to get that uninterrupted from here. But this is the last of me speaking on screen. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did make it this far, the videos that you guys can expect in the very near future: my Japan vlog, my Sable Valley marathon, my Mega Rex marathon. I have 2 other fun projects that I'm working on. I have like 7 projects. I'm trying to get them done. I'm working so hard. And then hopefully this will also look pretty. If you guys have an idea for what I should do with all this extra space, you guys can just leave a comment in the section down below. But also, I mean, there's so much that you guys can comment on. Thoughts on Subsidia, favorite songs, least favorite songs. Do you like Lost Lands? Do you hate Lost Lands? Do you think Excision has a real dinosaur? Have you guys ever seen Excision and I in the same room? Like I said, we have the same birthday and we're both Canadian. He is the more supreme boomer though. I'm definitely not at his level, but maybe one day. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye. Damn.